some analysis now about the legality or otherwise of what is happening in Egypt. Yussef Auf is a judge and a constitutional scholar, and he joins me from Cairo. Thanks for joining us on Al Jazeera. What is your impression of Cairo, Egypt at the moment?
Unfortunately, as you can see, there is no sound in Cairo now, but only the violence and the law of power. Power is controlling everything on the ground. There is no place for negotiations, for dialogue, for speaking to each other, I mean the two parties. And this is a very critical situation for the whole political process and the near future and the far future of Egypt as well. I think the two parties in Egypt has to take the responsibility for the sake of the country, for the sake of these people, and to have to sit down and to find a way out of this crisis.
Is there a rule of law operational in Egypt at the moment, or is it open season, as they would say colloquially?
There is no rule of law in Egypt since the 2011 revolution, and this is obvious for anyone who is interested and following up what's happening. There is no rule of law because there is so high polarized country, no high polarized nation now. The Egyptian nation is splitted, and everyone is interpreting everything happening in Egypt according to his own view. There is no trust in the public institutions, no trust in the judiciary, the public prosecutor, no trust in the security apparatuses, and no trust for even under SCAF, under President Morsi, under Fattah Sisi, interim president. There is a huge crisis of trust in Egypt. So there is no rule of law, and this is actually, I believe, as a judge and as one who is interested and working in the legal field, I think the only way for Egypt now is to come back to rule of law.
And how is that achieved? How do you come back to a rule of law? And obviously I'm heading that question towards the constitution. Is Egypt under the rule of a constitution at the moment, or do they have to come up with a new one, legislate for a new constitution?
Of course, as you know, Egypt now, the Egyptian constitution now of 2012 has been suspended since the July 3rd movement by the military. So there is no constitution now, the 2012. But actually, let me tell you that the 2012 constitution, there were some suggestions by the Muslim Brotherhood themselves to amend this constitution on June and May, last May and June. So there are many problems in this constitution, and they themselves called for its amendment. But now there is no constitution at all. There is just interim constitutional declaration. And let me say this clearly. It is not about having a constitution, about having a constitutional declaration. It's about the intention and the political will of the whole parties to abide by this constitution and to abide by a framework for the whole political process. These frameworks, the whole parties in Egypt are not able so far to build it.
You must tell us more about what you mean by a framework, because the question is the interim government operating with legality?
I cannot say it's operating with legality or not, because Egypt now is being governed by de facto power. It's not by law, it's by de facto. And this is, of course, this is a huge crisis for the rule of law. But the interim government and the military have been saying that we are moving forward to getting back to elections and to having an elected government, like in 2 or 3 months maybe. But again, I think there has to be some ways to find trust in this whole political process. But getting back to your point about the legality, I think the only solution for the whole Egyptian crisis is not the violence and not having. And by the way, I refuse the strategy of the Muslim Brotherhood, who have been calling for protests for protesting every day in the streets. This way now will not achieve anything in Egypt. The Egyptian people got bored about the revolutions. Egyptian people refuse any kind of demonstrations from any party. The whole political elite should sit down and should take the responsibility to do something. This is the only way out. It's not about rule of law, having a constitution, having elected parliament, or getting back Morsi or anything of these issues.
Very interesting. Judge Yussef Auf, many thanks to you for joining us on Al Jazeera.
You're welcome.
The man they